the Benefits with Savoy Associates. My name is Chris Vanderwolk, and I am the Chief Compliance Officer here at Savoy. I'm joined today with my friend Anthony Mangine, who's a broker channel manager at ADP. Anthony, your title is one thing. I refer to you as my go-to guy. You help me out with a ton of stuff. Welcome today to Beyond the Benefits.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Really appreciate it.
So first things first, what is a broker channel manager at ADP?
Great question, right? So I love the go-to guy. So if we can use that more often, that'd be great. But really my job here at ADP is to be a conduit to Savoy, right? So ADP is a big machine that operates in many, many different facets. However, our relationship that we've built over these past 3 years, it's my job to grow that, educate your network, and ultimately be that go-to guy for you guys for all things ADP. We found often that people talking to multiple different ADP people did not create continuity. So we look to ultimately put that one person in place, and that is me.
Yeah. So last year I was at an ADP event, and your organizational leader of sales, I don't know, president of sales, he said you guys have 8,500 quota carrying sales reps worldwide. So I can imagine how you're going to run into somebody who works for ADP somewhere at some point.
Yeah, quite often, Chris, and we've run into it before in some of our interactions as well. I think the big thing here, and especially in New Jersey, right, it is probably our most saturated geographic area because our headquarters is here. This is where we started. This is where we were born. So it's even more here in the tri-state area.
Yeah, 75 years this year, right?
It is.
And started in the upstairs of an ice cream shop.
Wow, you do listen. You do read up on our history. Much appreciated, and that is all true.
And now 8,500 quota carrying salespeople, which I think anybody who's in sales would love to have that kind of sales force out there.
Yes, absolutely. A little intimidating to certain other people, but we also just surpassed 1 million clients too. So I think that's a really big testament to what we're doing here at ADP.
That's incredible. And you guys do, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but something like you pay 1 in 6 Americans every pay cycle. Is that right?
Yeah, we go with the 1 in 6, 1 in 5 Americans, right? Depending on the day. But typically we have about 40 million US data sets or employees that we're able to anonymize and give back to our broker partners and our clients. So it's been a really, really growth initiative of ours. And I know you've seen some stuff at our recent broker summit about how we're taking that even to the next level too. We'll get into that in a little bit here.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. I'm a nerd, and I say that I'm proud of it. But ADP has, I think, the best data set on the planet when it comes to compensation, at a minimum benefits contributions, because you're running more payroll than anybody else. I mean, we looked at 2 job reports in this country, look to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and ADP's job reports. And often people trust ADP more than the BLS report. So I've seen some of the data. Let's talk about how you can help some of our brokers with some of those tools.
Yeah, great. And our job report does come out before the other one too. So when we say
they're copying,
listen, there might be a little overlay there. But so with the brokers, right? I think data is so important in this game that everybody's playing, right? And what ADP did, as I mentioned before, is we've anonymized it and we're giving it back. And it's true data, Chris, which I think it's not a survey. It's not somebody saying I made $110,000 when they're really making 100, right? It's true data that we're giving back. And when you look at it from a benefit perspective, right, the contribution levels, participation rates, demographic breakdowns, all these things are how you guys go to design strategies, or the broker community goes to design strategies. So utilizing that real life data that we know is true and given to them and even broken down to a geographic level or to a specific vertical, so we can even get more granular with it, I think just gives them a leg up. And we do this a lot proactively. I work with your team a lot, bringing me a vertical, bringing me a group. Hey, what do you have on this one? We're not the end all be all. We're not trying to be, but I think there's always a couple points that you could take from our data set. That's on the benefit side. Compensation side, you said it, pay 1 in 5, 1 in 6 Americans. Having that data when you're going out to hire, we never want you to overpay for an employee. We never want you to underpay, because the chance of them staying there probably goes down pretty significantly. Mm-hmm. So getting that just right salary is really where we try to help. And that turns dividends from a financial perspective. So you're not overpaying, or you're not paying for retention and attraction efforts, right? Which all go into those turnover numbers.
Yeah, open job slots where you've got people carrying the weight of 2 or 3 jobs because you've got a role that you need to fill.
Of course.
And on an intuitive level, you can look at a job posting that's left open for too long and say you're not offering enough something. Maybe it's the wrong work-life balance. Maybe it's the wrong salary, but when you actually get the chance to go see the data, and I've called you for data before and been amazed at the level of detail you can provide for a given title or a given industry in a given area. You guys have it all broken down, but you guys are, for the purposes of our audience, you're in every state and territory the United States has. And so you have that data for what people are really getting paid. It's not like when you go on to, I'm not going to name them, but some of those websites where people say what they're making and you take it with a grain of salt. And if there's only one report in there, you've got one report. If there's hundreds, then okay, sure. But a lot of the people that we're having these conversations about, there aren't hundreds of those people at any given company. It's, what am I going to pay this executive? What am I going to pay the salesperson? How are they getting comped and things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think even to layer on some of the HCM data or the HR data that we have to turnover rates, right? So if you're looking at an organization, a specific vertical, a specific geographic area, if you can look at a turnover rate, where do you measure up? Where does that organization measure up to its peers, right? If we're really breaking it down to that level, why is your turnover rate higher than your competitors? Is it salary? Is it benefit strategy, right? Is it culture, right? Which I just heard a study that 62% of people are staying at jobs, not because of pay, but because of the culture, right? You get a pay raise nowadays and it's almost overshadowed in the next 2 months.
By the time you get to the gas station.
Exactly. So culture is really keeping people now. So we look at that turnover data, and a broker can no longer be just a benefit specialist, right? I think you guys know that better than us, and you try to educate your broker network that there's other things that they need to look at. They need to be business consultants now because they're asked to do more and more and more. And I think you, Savoy, do a great job in insulating them or giving them infrastructure around these other things. ADP is a cog in that wheel, and we open up a whole nother level of how we impact an organization.
Absolutely. And so for our brokers, this gives them a way. I get legal questions from brokers all the time. And this isn't a broker asking for their clients to send their legal questions their way. It's the client has no other way to get these answered, or so they think. And another way I think a broker could show value is not by trying to be their lawyer, because that is not part of an insurance producer license at all, not part of the job description, and certainly not something they want to engage in. But they can be a business consultant. They can show these data points, and they can help lean into business process optimization, helping them figure out how to work through the modern economy, which is quite a bit more challenging than even just 5 years ago before COVID.
Yeah, it's so true, right? And I think it's changed everybody, and it's changed everybody, the way everybody goes about business, right? And I think you touched on compliance too, right? You guys have an awesome compliance department, headed by yourself over here. ADP
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of things that ADP does on that side as well to protect the businesses. And again, not the end all be all. We play a big role in that, from handbook, leave administration, COBRA distribution, right? Benefit strategies, ACA, right? There's so many different things that a business has to stay on top of. If we team up, ADP and Savoy and the broker that's in charge of that, I think that's where we all win, right?
Even stuff as simple as, we now have people working everywhere. You could have 10 employees in your company, and one of them moves out to, I'm going to use Washington State. And Washington State has its own paid leave law, and it applies to everybody who lives in Washington State. And I would bet ADP knows that if you punch in the employee zip code and it's in Washington, it's already going to calculate and withhold those taxes and make sure they get impounded and paid over to the right party.
100%. And I think that's a really good point. Multi-state compliance is one thing. It's the first thing I look up about an organization. If somebody brings it to me, if a Savoy broker brings it to me, are they in multiple states? Because right there, that's where we're leading the conversation off, because there's so many things that go into that. 360 plus different leave laws, right? You touched on one of them, right? There's 360.
I can't keep them straight in my head.
Nobody can, right? And a wise man told me that if you're operating in more than 2 states and you're doing it by yourself, you're most likely out of compliance, right? It's just too hard to keep up with all that. So you want to lean on an expert, whether it's us, whether it's a partner in the Savoy network, right? There's times to reach out and bring in a third party in those situations.
Yeah, the times where doing it yourself is the most expensive possible way when it all goes sideways. So let's talk a little bit about Savoy and ADP. We have a special relationship. What does that mean for our brokers? Because they don't care what it means for Savoy. What does it mean for our brokers that Savoy and ADP have a special relationship?
Yeah, it's another great question here. And you guys are part of the Partner Advantage program. Again, they don't care about the name of it. They care about what it delivers to them too. So ADP and Savoy have created this relationship. We've been working together for multiple years. Side note here, Savoy was my first implementation at ADP. So there's a little nostalgia here, sitting here speaking with you today, Chris. So, but from a broker lens, right, they can come to Savoy and get access to that partnership that we've developed, right? And there's a multitude of things go into them. I'll go into a couple of them here. We talked about benchmarking, having access to 40 million US employee data set that ADP has is one of the top things that we get inquiries about, right? So having access to that, I think, is number one. Number two, I think, is the people that are assigned to it, right? You have one person in me who is kind of the face of the relationship, the go-to guy. And then it's my job to disseminate that within ADP to figure out whatever it is we need. Mm-hmm. If it's service, we have an executive relationship manager assigned to the Savoy relationship. So listen, escalations happen, fires happen. There has to be a place to go to put those out and put everybody at ease, right? So we put that person in place as well. Also, anything that comes over to us, dedicated implementation team, dedicated service team. So we're trying to build continuity, trying to build familiarity. So if a broker brings one over today and they bring one over in 6 months, they're dealing with the same people over and over again. And I think that just makes everybody feel a little bit more at ease.
And I think that's something that might resonate really strongly with our brokers is they get an account manager for the cases that normally wouldn't get an account manager by virtue of working through our relationship.
Yeah, it is. It's almost, especially the market that you guys really, really focus in, that over 50 space, right? You would get a dedicated account manager. You know, if they just went to ADP directly, they would not, right? They would be more of a call center environment. So through the partnership, it's a great point, Chris, that's one big differentiator, and people want that dedicated support. I think we all know that, right?
Yeah, I mean, to our brokers, those 50 to 150 groups are a lot of time their lifeblood. Yeah. Those could be their biggest clients. They really place a high priority on them. It's not like they're not important to our brokers. So being able to find a relationship where we can get an account manager in there who also treats it as importantly is huge.
Yeah, and that was kind of how the partnership was designed to offer that, and that offers that extra level or extra reason to come to Savoy. One other thing too, I think our relationship with our strategic carriers, right? You guys know better than we do. You deal with them on an everyday basis. However, we're deploying a lot of that and making that connection, right? You guys develop these great strategies, the brokers develop the strategies, they input it into a benefit administration solution, and then how are we connecting it to the carriers, right? And I think that's a developing world as we speak.
From my perspective, that's one of the coolest parts is you guys have muscle that most entities don't in terms of just your base of employees that are in your system. It's hard to get a critical mass for most parties to say, hey, you need to create an API to make this work for us. And a lot of times carriers will fight that because, okay, well, your platform's got 4 million users. I'm not going to invest in that. But when you're talking about 40 million users, then you've got a different conversation. Now the math starts to make sense. And so you guys have been able to pull people to the table that not only helps for ADP, but candidly, I think it helps the entire market because once carrier X builds an API, the other platforms can then use it. So you're really helping, I think, overall umbrella effect or halo effect for everybody. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. I'm glad we could help now. But we do have, I think it's 23 strategic carriers, mostly on the ancillary side. You guys know better than most that the medical will come around one day. Eventually, right? But I think the two things that we're really doing there too is the API connections, which makes carrier connections set up just a breeze, Chris. And everybody's lived through an EDI setup connection. It's back and forth, files back and forth.
You get it done before the renewal.
Yeah, perfect. And then you switch carriers, and then we're back to square one. So I think that's a big proponent of the API, but then also evidence of insurability built in there, and then a little added benefit with a benefit decision support tool that, you know, as any new client comes on, we've embedded NIA into our technology, and we're giving back. And I think that gives a little bit to everybody, right? And I think to Savoy, maybe you're not fielding as many questions because people feel comfortable about the decisions they're making. Maybe you're getting an increase in an ancillary, you know, you get another body to go in. But I think the best part is that you have people making better decisions, right? And I could tell you from when I was in my early 20s, I was didn't pay attention in the education meeting, right? I didn't look at the packet that anybody sent me. And then 4 minutes before midnight, I made my decision, right? And I didn't know what I was selecting.
Yeah.
Now, as a father, things have changed.
Now it's
right?
8 minutes before midnight.
You got it, right? Asking my wife, what do we need, right? No, so I think having that tool built in there really kind of increases the employee engagement and the overall experience.
Yeah, go back to the hypothetical group, 10 employees, one in Washington. You're not getting them together to have a meeting anymore. And we're talking 25 to 40% of payroll for benefits, and maybe not even spending an hour to talk about them. So any tool we can put into an employee's hand to better help them understand it is critical. So now let's talk about how our brokers can lean in and leverage our relationship to either win or retain their business. One of the things that I'll direct you to, I think, is their clients likely already have ADP, and they may even have services that they're not utilizing, that they're paying for. Yeah. And I think we've gone through a case or two like that. Yeah. You want to talk a little bit about how brokers can understand our relationship to help them either win or keep their clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's we have a recent one too, Chris, that kind of jumps off the page at me too, that an individual in your organization came to me knowing that somebody was looking to implement a benefit administration platform. They were looking at Employee Navigator, very popular with you guys. You guys do it very, very well. And in certain situations, it's a perfect fit. Makes sense. We have integrations with them. They're our biggest integrated partner.
Yeah, there's a lid for every pot.
Exactly. So the thing that your employee noticed was that they have ADP payroll. So she came to me, she said, hey, can you take a look and tell me what this client has with us? Because most people are multi-module with ADP, right? Mm-hmm. They bought a bundle, right? We see stats that organizations use 30% of what they actually buy, right? And that's not just us, that's across the industry.
They say we use like 10% of our brain too.
Exactly, but perfect. Yeah, there you go. So maybe we're winning on that on that front. So they came to us and we looked it up, and they had benefit administration with us. So they were, at first glance, they were like, let's get Navigator in here. They want an electronic solution. Mm-hmm. That was the first initial reaction. Looking back on it, they're paying for our benefit administration. They actually already had the plans built out. And the reason why is they were doing paper enrollments. They outgrew that, right? That there comes a point where that just becomes not sustainable to do anymore. They outgrew it, but they were adding all this information into our system manually. It was so that we can process the ACA. Makes sense, right? I've seen it before. It's not the first time I've seen it, but it got uncontrollable from a one-person standpoint. So what we did, we deployed our professional services team. We built out the rest of the system. We tested the open enrollment system, which would be customer-facing through their open enrollment or any new hires that came on. The team over there felt comfortable. The broker felt comfortable. We all kind of sat together at a table, virtually, of course, but got it together. And then we deployed it and we rolled it out. And we're actually at stage 2 now, where we're building those carrier connections that I just talked about too. And through the Savoy partnership, we're waiving the implementation fees on it. So it's not costing the client an extra dime. Whatever they were paying, there was no charges for anything. We kind of came together, and from a retention strategy, I think this is really where we all win, right? Now we have a happy client who's utilizing the technology the way it should be.
Absolutely. So, and all things being equal, fewer systems is a better system. And so
I appreciate you saying that.
Like Employee Navigator does a great job, but it would have to talk to ADP, and there's always a delay. And every time there's time for two systems to talk, there's an opportunity for something to go wrong. And it does a great job very often, most of the time, but we can eliminate those chances even better. So optimizing that, making them understand the value of what they're actually paying for. And if you use a tool all day and you don't know it does something, you tend to assume that it doesn't do that thing. Yeah. And so huge opportunity there. I talk to CFOs that I know, and they don't want to move payroll because it's hard and there's a lot involved, and they're busy trying to do other things to optimize their business. Yeah. And so if you can help a client stay there, there's a win in that as well, because disruption can be challenging for them.
Of course. Speaking with a CFO recently as well, too, first thing he said to me was, I don't want to move payroll vendors. And it's a tough way to start a conversation, but one thing I pride myself on, and my team here in New Jersey and a lot of us across the country that really pride ourselves, we're not here to change a vendor on your payroll invoice. If we can't find some sort of business impact, financial impact, or process impact, we're probably not doing our job. And we're not just a payroll company. And it's the one thing that we always say whenever we're meeting with your AEs, with your broker network is, if you think of us as just a payroll provider, then we didn't do our job, right? So a lot of what we see too is that we take that consultative approach. And I think the one unique thing about ADP and where the broker network can really benefit is you have access to everything at ADP through me and this channel, that we can go any different direction, right?
We could spend days talking about the various workers' comp management and everything else you guys do.
Outsourcing, managed services, right? Obviously, we have our PEO, we have global services, small business, mid-business, enterprise business. I mean, the list goes on. I feel like we're that big red toolbox from Craftsman that sits in your garage. It's just, you open a drawer and you find something you haven't seen in a long time, right?
There it is.
Exactly. So
you mentioned TotalSource PEO. We are fans of it here. We work with several PEOs, and TotalSource is one of the tools in our toolbox, like you mentioned. How should brokers understand the TotalSource relationship?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And it's always the elephant in the room too, Chris, because brokers here probably ran into it, competed against it, whether it be ADP TotalSource or another PEO. There's thousands now, Chris. It's a saturated market. Mm-hmm. Somebody's knocking on your client's door at some point, usually about around renewal point, because they know that. So a good salesperson would do that. So the way it works at ADP, and I think proactive is always better, I think is the first thing to say. If you think they could be a fit, bring it to us. This offers a layer of protection, right? So now you're in control of the situation. As you mentioned, we do have a large sales team, so they could be knocking on the door, or other vendors could be knocking on the door as well. And all it takes is that, hey, we're having a down quarter, we need to show savings, or hey, we need to attract people, we want Fortune 200 benefits. You get a business owner at the right time, and relationships are good, but money talks sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, being proactive about that offers a level of protection to the broker. So you have a renewal coming up, 9/1, 10/1, 1/1, whatever it is. If we take a look at the group together, we can actually run it through, see if the financials make sense, which is always a good start, but also what's going on in their business, right? We look at it holistically, and ultimately, if it makes sense, we do it together, right? And it's not in this reactive situation where there's already a PEO in there and they're looking to stop it, fight it, compete against it, mm-hmm. right? We want to be that proactive approach. And when we do it together, it works a lot better.
So I remember 10 years ago, people went to a PEO for two reasons: the medical rate or the workers' comp rate. Mm-hmm. And nothing else really mattered to the buyer. That was what they were buying on. Today, the world is far more complicated for employers to offer benefits, to be compliant with, I think, would you say 360 leave laws?
Yes, yeah.
So those are other reasons why people are now engaging in a PEO conversation. What are some of the key characteristics that a broker should look out for to identify if their group should be a PEO candidate? You mentioned a couple of the buying features, either cost savings or trying to attract people with higher quality benefits than they might be able to get themselves. What are some of the things that they should look for? What's a group that might be primed to go into a PEO look like?
Yeah, I think obviously it varies state by state, as most people know. Most people who are listening to this podcast would understand that too. New York, it makes a lot of sense, under 100 market. I think in New Jersey, probably pretty similar in that market space as well, that groups that are looking to grow don't have the time or infrastructure to focus on the HR, the compliance side of the house. And I think a PEO does insulate an organization. There is skin on the game, whether it's ADP or any other PEO. They're there to protect the organization, be that second set of eyes and ears. So that size is pretty good. I think growth is a big thing as well. Growth and infrastructure, as I mentioned, if you're rapidly growing, you want to focus on revenue generating activities, whether that's attracting new people, growing the business, diving into different revenue sources, things of that nature. Focusing on HR and compliance is probably not the best way to spend your time.
So to go back to earlier, the broker who's getting all the legal questions from their client, that might be a good client to say, hey, you probably ought to have some professional HR and legal backing you up.
Absolutely.
If you're engaging these things, maybe this is the right fit for you to have that bigger umbrella to help you out.
And the multi-state compliance, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's something that it's almost impossible to keep up with. If people are hiring remote and they're just going where the talent is, that's a perfect fit, because they're gonna find somebody in Colorado and California and Texas, and all of a sudden you're gonna need to be compliant in all those states. How are you gonna do that as a one man or woman HR team, right? So that's where people really rely on us. And I think the one good part about that, if a Savoy broker does bring us a PEO case, let's say the trifecta works, the benefits work, the financials work, and the technology and the compliance support is there. They move into the ADP PEO. The broker stays involved. They are involved in all of these renewals. So we keep track of it as they continue to grow. You knew this was a hyper growth opportunity. So now they grow to 150, 200 employees. You're involved in these renewals. So as they come up, let's reevaluate it together, right? We have other solutions. We can move them off of the PEO and move them into a comprehensive service or managed service environment, or just to our technology, depending on what their business needs are. So they don't go away, right? Just because they're in the ADP PEO, you still are that broker. You're still the face of the relationship. You brought it to us. That was one thing that we heard loud and clear from brokers, that we want to still be involved, and we're giving that opportunity. So that's something that's changed and tweaked that most people probably don't know about or don't leverage enough.
So if I wanted to try to wrap all this up and put a bow on it, if you want to hire employees or employ employees or do what your actual primary function of your business is, leveraging ADP through the Savoy relationship will get you access to tools that will make your life as a broker or an employer easier. And that's really the key here.
I mean, kind of hit that one on the head again, Chris. And I think just proactive is better when it comes down to it. If we're ahead of the game before an open enrollment, 3-4 months, we're having discussions, I think we can come to the table together, and it looks a lot better from the client side as well. So.
All right. Well, to all of our listeners, if you are wondering how to get Anthony into your toolkit, just go ahead and reach out to your Savoy representative, and we'll be happy to do that. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Take care.